Did you mention my name?
Yeah, I said I wonder where David Zolti is, and then you popped in. So I said I should have been asking about Mashiach.
Sorry, I don't get it. Asking about Mashiach?
And I asked about you a moment later. You logged in. Should have asked about Mashiach. Maybe he would have logged in.
Okay.
Maybe he did.
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, each shul can't have more than one Mashiach, and we already have a couple of chopping at the bit. So I'm not sure. Okay. Sometimes if someone has grandiose visions, thinking he's someone special, it's a sign of insanity. I think Rav Hutner once said that we only throw out our bochum for two reasons: for either Gilu Aroyos or Gilu Eliyahu. Okay, so we are at the bottom of Daf Heyabad Beis. Now, really, we got to the top of Amud Aleph, but the subject started right at the bottom of Heyabad Beis. We know Rish Lakish said there's a chazaka. We pass like Rish Lakish. There's a chazaka. Someone will not pay off a choiv before it is due. So if someone claimed to have paid off a choiv before it was due, he's not believed. So what would happen if tavai la achashman? So the choiv was due January 1st, 2025, and on January the 3rd, 2025, the Malva went to the loiva and said, please pay me up. So the halacha is the Amar loy, and what was the loiva's response? Paraticha b'saychsman. I didn't pay January 1st, 2025. I paid in August of 2024. So here we have two factors that sort of contradict each other. On the one hand, he's not believed to say that he paid before it was due because you have Rish Lakish's chazaka that says people don't pay things before they're due. But on the other hand, he could have said, I paid on January 1st, 2025. He could have said, I paid on January 2nd, 2025. And he didn't. So, Mao, mi amrinan, b'mokim chazaka, amrinan mali l'shaker. Do you say the fact that he has a migui, that he could have said, I paid it after January 1st, 2025, where I would have had full belief, and it would be koiver koil, and you wouldn't be able to collect a penny from me. Therefore, believe me when I say a tanya that works against me, that I paid early, or maybe b'mokim chazaka loy amrinon ma'ali l'shak. Maybe this nemanus of the migu that you have is not strong enough to overrule a chazaka, as Rashi says at the top of Amud Aleph. Even the muksuk log, they know the pareb six mama. It does not happen. So therefore, loy amrinon b'mokim dika chazaka the mari l'dibure ma'ali l'shak v'lamnu. In a place of a chazaka, the chazaka is stating you could not have paid early. We don't say that through a migu you'll get namonos, because the chazaka tells us that what you're saying is wrong. You couldn't have paid early. Toshma. So the Gemara brings rayas from our Mishnah, and that's why this shayla is over here. Otherwise, you would ask yourself, what is migu b'makam chazaka doing in middle of Bava Basra? It's because the Gemara is going to bring a raya or attempt to bring some rayas from our Mishnah. The Mishnah Paskin b'cheska shenosan at yavi raya shaloi nosan. What was the case? The case was where we had a wall that was agreed upon us to have been built, and it fell, it collapsed. So the halacha is one shutuf can force the other shutuf to join him in 50% of the wall. So what if shutuf A or neighbor A? I always refer to the neighbor who takes the initiative as neighbor A, and the neighbor who's dragging his feet as parasite. So this way it helps us understand what we're talking about. So neighbor A built a wall that was for Amasai, and now parasite has to pay. A couple of days after the wall was built, neighbor A asks parasite, so can I have my money? And parasite said, I paid you over it. The halach is parasite's believed. He's believed unless the neighbor A can bring a raya that parasite hasn't paid. So let's get a deeper understanding of what the Mishnah is referring to. Hey Chidami, if the case was that after the wall was built, the neighbor A went to Parasite and said, "Pay me." I paid you as soon as it was built. I paid you right on time. I paid you as soon as it was built. Pshita. I don't need a Mishnah to tell me that in that case the Parasite is believed. The Mishnah obviously speaking in a case where I might otherwise have thought that Parasite would not be believed. Ella lav the Amr lei praticha b'saychsman. It must be a case where Parasite said, "I didn't wait till you finished the wall for Amos and then paid you. I already paid you during construction." So what do you see from here? Alma filu b'makom chazaka amrin and mali l'shaker. You see that even though his taina was inferior because he tained that I paid you before it was due, I'm believed because I could have said I paid you now. So this is exactly the case that the Gemara is pondering, and our Mishnah seems to indicate that the Parasite will be believed. So Gemara shiny hacha, he didn't pay early. Because even if he paid before the wall was complete, that's not considered paying early. Every rose is time. If you think about it, why do I have to, as neighbor A, why do I have to lay out the money and then go after you, Parasite, later? You should be putting up the money together with me, right? So therefore, as every block goes down, as every row goes down, this becomes due. So normally, Rish Lakish has a chazaka, someone doesn't pay early. But this is not considered paying early. If Parasite paid as each row was built, that's not called paying early. As a matter of fact, if he paid, then he wouldn't even be called Parasite. He would shake his image as present. He's actually paying right on time. Tashma. So let's try bring a raya from the Sefer. If the original wall was more than 4 amos, and neighbor A built a wall that was more than 4 amos, there we say the Parasite does not have to be a partner in the wall above 4 amos. He only has to be a partner in the wall up to 4 amos. So what if he said, "I'm not being part of that wall"? But then Mr. Parasite built a wall parallel to the wall that his neighbor built. And it's clear that his intention is that he's going to put beams across, and now he's going to have a house, and he's going to get a free wall, right? So then he has to pay. At what point does he become a chuy to pay? The moment he finishes his parallel wall. The halacha is, Midalat Amos Ulamayla. He built his parallel wall. There, I don't have to chip it. Parasite doesn't have to chip in with neighbor A. But if Parasite built a parallel wall, then he has to chip it. However, after he built his parallel wall, at that point, there would have been a chiyuv triggered for him to pay 50% of the wall above 4 amos from that neighbor A built. The halacha is, what if he says, "I paid you already"? So his neighbor comes and says, "Listen, you built a parallel wall, you got to pay me." And he said, "I paid you already." There he's not believed. We assume he didn't pay. Raya shanosan. He has to bring a raya that he in fact paid. The assumption is that he had not yet paid until he got to Bezdin. Now the neighbor A is taking to Bezdin. You can't tell me you paid already. The assumption is that you didn't pay. What is the precise case? It should tell me. He finished building his parallel wall on Monday. On Wednesday, neighbor A dragged his Parasite neighbor to Bezdin, and he said, "Pay me." And at this point, what did he answer? The Amar Loy, and Parasite answered, "Praticha bizmani." I paid as soon as I finished the wall. As soon as I finished the wall, that was machayv me to pay, because that indicated, that proves that in fact I was benefiting from your wall. And that's what I paid, not early. In fact, the more if that's the case, am I loy? Why shouldn't Parasite be believed? Why wouldn't he be believed? It's like any other loan. I paid it when it became due. So that cannot be shot in the Mishnah. Elalav, the Omar, it must be that what he said was, the Omar, let's look at the Aleph, the Omar lay probably, Praticha b'saychsmani. I paid even before I finished the wall. Now, the claim is that he paid before it was due, yet he's not believed. Alma b'makom chazaka lo yamrina mali l'shaker. He could have easily said, "I paid after I finished my wall." Instead, he said a bad time, "I paid before I finished my wall," but he has a migu that he could have said, "I paid after I finished my wall." And you see, he's not believed. So Gemara shiny hacha, the Amar mi yemer the machayv li rabbana. Normally, I don't agree with Rish Lakish's chazak, but in this case, sure we know for sure he didn't pay. Not because it wasn't due yet. It's because he doesn't even know that I'll have to pay. Maybe I won't have to pay. He wasn't even under the assumption that he would have to pay. And therefore, there's a much stronger indication that he surely didn't pay before. So therefore, none of these cases in our Mishnah are parallel to the shayla that we're pondering. When you have the standard chazakah that someone doesn't pay early, can a migui overrule that standard chazakah? And we do not have ipshitus to the shayla. Amalei Ravacha barei Rava l'Ravashi. Toshma. Now we're going to bring a raya not from our sugya, but from the big world out there. Malva goes to Loiva and tells Loiva, you owe me $100,000. And Loiva in front of Adam said, yes, I owe you the money. So now you have Adam that witnessed Mr. Loiva admitting that he had borrowed $100,000. Lamachar, the next day, I guess the Malva wanted to do it in stages. If he asked it to pay up right away, he might short circuit the Loiva. First, he needed to get a concession out of him that, in fact, he agreed that he borrowed the money. Lamachar, the next day, Mr. Malva goes to Loiva. Now that you admitted yesterday that you owe me the money, maybe you want to pay. Maybe you want to follow the din, not the minig, right? So Dr. Gemara, what if the Loiva says, I paid you. Mr. Loiva said, I paid you. Potter, he's Potter, because he is believed to say that he paid. But what if he says, Ein lach biyadi, I don't owe you anything, chayiv, then the Mr. Loiva is going to be chayiv. So what exactly did he say? What do you mean? What does it mean? He said, Ein lach biyadi, I don't owe you money. Why don't I owe you money? Is it because I didn't borrow the money? My lab, nesativ lach, the amalei praticha bizmani. Maybe the reason why he claimed, the reason why the Loiva claimed, Ein lach biyadi, is because his claim is I paid it right on time. So if that's the case, if he said praticha bizmani, then he will be believed. Eilach biyadi, the amalei. So no, I'm getting a little bit confused. Mali biyadcha amalei hein l'machar amalei tneili. Im amar nesatev loch, he'll be potter. Eilach biyadi, he'll be chai. My love nesatev loch kama praticha bizmani. And the problem is, if he did that, why would he be chayiv? He should be potter. A person has enough money to say that he paid off his loan in time. So that cannot be pshat in the brisa. You know what it must mean? He must have claimed that he paid before it became due, which is now exactly the shayla that we're pondering. Vikatani, what is the brisa paskin in this specific case? Chayiv. I'm not believed. So here I have a migu. I could have said I paid when it was due. I said rather that I paid before it was due, and I'm not neman to say I paid before it was due, because there's a chazakah that says I wouldn't have paid before it was due, even though I have a migu supporting my argument, because I could have just as easily said I paid it after it became due. Alma, we have a right to our shaila, the mokem chazakah loy aminon ma li l'shaker. Zok Gemara, who said you should define ein lach biyadi as meaning that I paid before it became due? No. You know what ein lach biyadi means? My ein lach biyadi means like how you divide my island. I'm denying that I ever owed you money in the first place. And the problem is, I just admitted yesterday in front of Adam that I did borrow money. That's why I'm not believed. The Amar kala aimer loy lavisi, the aimer loy parati dam. Once you said loy lavisi, it's as if you said loy parati. Today you can't turn around anymore and say I didn't borrow, because yesterday you had already admitted that you borrowed, and today by saying loy lavisi, it's as if you said I didn't pay, because if you claim you didn't borrow, you definitely didn't pay up. So therefore you'll be mechuyev to pay. So Tosfos has a very big problem with this Gemara, because there's a chiddush of bar. If I said loy lavisi, it's as if I also said loy parai. Right? Where is that nageya? That's nageya where the Malva wants a loiv and says you owe me money, and I deny it. Loy lavisi, I didn't touch. I don't owe you money. And now the Malva brings Adam, proved me a liar, and said I borrowed money. And then okay, you know what? I paid. There you say, since you earlier denied that you paid, that you even borrowed money, that's by definition testifying that you didn't pay me back. Now that we caught you in a lie, you can't fix that anymore by saying I had already paid back. You know why? Because if you denied that you ever borrowed the money, you clearly didn't pay me back. Correct, Tosfos, that's not relevant in our Shaila, because in our Shaila, yesterday I was moida that I borrowed money, and today I'm saying I didn't borrow money. I said lahadam. That has nothing to do with because here the way we're learning the Gemara is I didn't say paraiti. Yesterday I said lovisi, and today I said lo lovisi. So I'm not believed to say today lo lovisi because yesterday in front of Adam I was moida that lovisi. Where is there's no question of lo paraiti over here because that was never a discussion. He never came along. In this case, he never came along and claimed that he paid. Yesterday he said, I borrowed money in front of Adam. And today he said, I never borrowed money. He said, lahadam. So I contradicted myself. And we have Adam to say I was moida, so I'm chayiv. Why do I need this extra factor of loy paraiti? I'm not, loy paraiti only works if now I'm making another claim that I paid. But here, that's not what happened. I'm just saying that I never owed the money. So that's Tosfos' kash. So let's see Tosfos. It's a simple Tosfos. Kol Omer loy lovisi. Hiksha harav Yitzchak. Matzarach kan letam kol Omer loy lovisi kim leparaiti. He's not saying paraiti over here. Havada kivin shekfar hoida. Once he admitted that he borrowed the money, su loy mehem and loymer shaloy lova. I don't need any love this for that. I was minded that I owe money. So Zok Tosfos all the way at the end. V'omer ri the itzrich lashminon the leimotzi lemeimar. He can't delay himself voice. When I said loy lovisi, I didn't mamish. When I said la'adam loy lovisi, I didn't mamish mean that I didn't borrow money. You know what I meant? I didn't mean loy lova klal. Eloki ila loy lovisi lefisha b'raiti. Even if he wants to make a delay, that I didn't mean I didn't borrow money. I meant I don't owe money. Why? Because I paid up. And I looked at today. Can what you are. Kamash malon the ilu oimer loy b'raiti behedia. The moment you say loy lovisi, you can no longer delay and say you meant paraiti, because loy lovisi by definition means loy paraiti.
Loy lovisi, voltei mind.
So you're talking about a Litvish crook who's trying to deny himself out of it. Now, Ravel Yishvei once told a young man when he got married, he said, "Zos to zayn, nishan as alom de sheganev." Everyone knows that his lom de today is why he's not chayv. But die zan alom de sheganev, dan the kinder zan parosta genom. Yeah, that's what he said. Okay. Let's talk to Gemara weiter. Samach loy koisel achar megalgal in alav. If you build a parallel wall, if Mr. Parasite builds a parallel wall to the wall that neighbor A built, then it shows clearly that he is very happy with that other wall, with its extended height wall, because he's going to be using the full height of that wall. Now he's mechuyev to chip in and pay for that wall. Zok to Gemara, there's details that we have to iron out. Omer Rav Huna, samach lepalga, samach lekula. What if the wall that the neighbor A built was 20 feet long? It covered our entire border. And I, as Mr. Parasite, didn't build a 20-foot parallel wall. I built a 10-foot parallel wall because I don't need a 20-foot addition to my house. I only need a 10-foot addition to my house. It doesn't make a difference. Once I did that, I'm now liable to pay 50% of the entire wall. Somach lepalga, somach lekula. Zok Rashi, somach lepalga, shloi haya koisel chodesh orich kikoisel rishon, ela bechetzoy. It was only 10 feet long. Or a begoivoi. You built it 30 feet up. I only built my wall 25 feet up. Nevertheless, Somach L'Kula, Chayv Litin Chelkoi, B'Koisel Rishon, Parasite has to pay neighbor A 50% of the entire wall. Ki ilu Somach Koisel Sheni Keneged Kol Rishon. What's the reason for that? Look, Rashi, the Kivan, the Hischil, once you started, Soifai Ligmar V'Yitin Tikra, you're definitely going to continue. It's too enticing for you. You have a free wall. If you have a free wall and you're showing it, you're already using it, you're going to end up using it all. Which not be learned. All of us a tikra, You don't have to see me actually using the wall. Merely my intent, even sometime in the future to use it, is enough to be mechayiv. Okay? Tosfos, it's funny, Rashi introduces Tosfos. So there's some other pairs that Rashi is bringing down. I don't know who this Tosfos is. The Yasa Aliyah Shal Gabi Tikra, he's going to end up, even if I didn't build my parasite wall so high, I'm probably going to make another level. The Yitztarach Loy Koisel, I'm going to end up using the whole Koisel. And therefore I'm mechuyev to pay for the whole wall, even though right now my parallel wall doesn't show that I'm using the full wall that neighbor A built. Okay, so Zog to Gemara Vacher. That is the shita of Rav Huna. But Rav Nachman is Mekel, and he says, L'mai de samach, l'mai de loy samach, will only make me pay 50%. Parasite only has to pay 50% of the amount of wall that he's actually going to use. However, even though Rav Huna says, samach lepalga, samach lekula, if there's very clear, and it's very clearly notable from the design of my parallel wall, from the design of my renovation, that I don't intend to take advantage of your full wall, only part of it, then he will be moed. So moed Rav Huna kind of a luft, and there's different pshatim. Rashi has a pshat, Tosfos has a pshat as to what kind of the lufta is. But whatever it is, it means that the way I did my renovation, it was clear that I'm not intending to use your whole wall, and I'm going to, instead of learning Rashi inside, I'm going to show you a picture that I found on. There's a very good writer in Aldaf. I think it's called Bava Illuminated. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's very. So I'm not sure if you could see this picture here. So here, what happened is I didn't build a parallel wall. I actually built a perpendicular wall. So if I built a perpendicular wall, and the perpendicular wall was only, let's say you built a 30-foot wall from edge to edge of my property, and I only built a perpendicular wall 20 feet down, it's pretty clear that I only want to make a 20-foot addition to my house. I'm not looking to add more, because I could have made that perpendicular wall at the back. The about I made here, it clearly shows that this is my intention, not to add more to it. Does that make sense? That's how Rashi learns, and he holds kind of a lufta is one case. It's speaking where the added the wall is perpendicular, and it created a corner which would clearly show that my intention is not to go further than that. Tosfos learns it's kind of is referring to how much linear feet of the wall I plan to use, similar to this. Lufta is if I made an indication that I'm not planning to go to the full height of the wall. So there were certain, the way the wall was built is normally the top of the wall has a certain feature that lets the rain drain off of it. So you put the top brick there, which would clearly indicate you're not building higher. So in either way, it's an indication that you're not going to build higher. There, even if Huna would agree that I only have to pay for what I'm using. Umaydir of Nachman, who holds I only have to pay for what I'm using, is Bafriza Uvekavato Dikshuri. What happens if I only built up half the wall, which I actually have in the picture? I only built up half the wall, not full height, but the way it works is whenever you want to put beams to be supported by the wall to support a floor, they wouldn't put the beams right on the block because the blocks had moisture in them and they would rot the beams out. So what they would always do is one of two things. Either where they were planning to put those floor joints, they would first put a plate on top or a horizontal beam, which we call a plate in our construction. And then on top of that, they put the joists across so that the joists themselves would never come into contact with the brick and they won't get moist. So if I put that there, it's a clear indication that I'm planning to make a second floor. So I'm for sure going to be building on it later. So therefore, I'll have to pay for the whole wall. The two
metal.
it was not metal; it was actually made out of wood. That will rot catch it. And Ubekavata Dikshuri is some people that didn't have a piece of wood to go all the way across. In this case, my intent would be to put the joists on top of this board, and then they would brick in around it. Sometimes what they would do is they would just build on the surface of the wall three pieces of wood coming out that would form like a cradle, and then the joist would sit in the cradle. I would call it a flush beam versus a beam that sits on top. But these were two ways of doing it. But whatever it is, it's an indication clearly that I plan to make in the future a second floor. There, even Reb Nachman would agree that I have to chip in. Beautiful. Amar Afuda. Beikvi loy havi chazak.
1 second. So the first one, the camera left means I'm sure not going to use it. And Reb Nachman means
Exactly.
I'm sure I am using it.
Right. So the default of Rav Huna is that I'm going to use it unless you show me not. The default of Rav Nachman is that I'm not going to use it unless you show me that you will. No, not forget. The default of Rav Huna is I'm not going to. The default of Rav Nachman is that I'm not going to use it, and therefore I only pay for what I'm using. I'm sorry.
Lotfi, you explained Reb Nachman's about freezing the kavach that I'm putting something to build something.
Right. So the default is that I'm not using it unless I do a freeze of the kabbalah that shows that I will. Stam a person wouldn't use it. Bake filo have a chazak. What does that mean? Zokt Rashi. Shimon shegbia kaisel hachoylik b'chotzer l'mayla midalaram. So Shimon is the person who I refer to as neighbor one. Neighbor one, we rebuilt a wall more than 4 hours. V'ahasa boy chaloy nois litzad ruvein lamnochas roshe karis k'moshe b'rashti. He built joist hangers into his wall. So neighbor A built a wall and he built joist hangers into it. My neighbor didn't say he wants anything, but I built joist hangers into it. So imagine what happens is I put joist hangers into the wall because I think maybe one day I'll want to use it. And then when I go to collect from him, I'll say, what do you mean you're collecting from me? I paid you already. I'll prove it to you that I paid you already. Because there's joist hangers there. Why in the world would there be joist hangers here? Obviously, because I chipped in and I need those joist hangers. Had I not chipped in with you, you would have never put joist hangers to service me if I'm not contributing a penny to this wall. You wouldn't have prepped it. So if I should decide at some time in the future to build a parallel wall, that I already have my joist hangers there. You would never have done that if it wasn't for the fact that I paid. So now that should be a right that I paid. The masnach by himlati, even if you, again, it's a different type of joist hangers. You lined it with wood. You leave holes in the wall to put joists in, and then you line the hole with wood so that your joist shouldn't be brick, wood on brick. Lahagin al rasha akaris. But lematzi lemema Reuben, Parasite can't say, ilav disai ba'adach, had I not chipped in with you on the wall originally, loitarchas kol haytircha. You would never have put these joist hangers here. That's not a tiny. You know why? You know why? Zok to Gemara. Rav Nachman. Sorry. Lo have zok v'yavak davar lehimti. You know the amalei aminali lechifaises li leilisra shisoi. The only reason why I did it is because I suspected that even though you're being a jerk and a parasite now, eventually you're going to build a parallel wall and you're going to realize it benefits for you. So what are we going to do? I'm going to jackhammer out holes in the wall for you to put your joist in. It's going to weaken my whole wall. So I already prepped it for you now because I knew eventually you'd succumb anyway. But it's not a rye at all that you've chipped in now, and therefore you still have to pay. Okay, let's quick look at the Bach Gimel. Omar Rav Nachman, what does the Bach say? Where's my Bach? I don't know where my Bach is. Is this the Bach? The Bach's over the bottom. I can't see it. No, that's what it was. Amar Nachman. Achzik luhurdi loy achzik lukshuri. Sometimes I'll put a joist hanger, but not because you're going to put a full floor joist. That's going to hold the weight of a full floor. Maybe you're just going to put small stuff. Maybe you're just going to use it for a roof, but you're not going to build a second story. The achzik luhurdi loy achzik lukshuri. If what happened is Rashi is telling us that the chazaka that we're talking about, the base chazaka that we know is if I'm in a property for 3 years and no one comes and says that's not your property, that's proof that the property belongs to me. And it's a 3-year chazaka. Zok Rashi, that's not what we're talking about. Rather, kol chazaka salolu, dishmaitzin, einan chazaka shaloshan. We're not discussing the chazaka of shaloshan. It is related to property rights. based on the fact that I had a scenario happening and you were a moicha, that proves something, but it's not the 3-year proof that we're talking about that I owned all property. The Loshayach Shaloshonim, and that's not what we're discussing. What are we discussing here, Zok Rashi? We're neighbors. And I'm taking advantage, I'm using something of your property. And the question is, do I have proof that in fact we had an agreement that I might have even paid for to allow me to take advantage of your property this way? That type of agreement, if I use your property in such a way where you should be protesting if you wouldn't have allowed me to, and you didn't, there the chazaka is instant. It's not a 3-year chazaka. So let's go on. What's the reason? If I see you doing something that looks like it's going to be a relatively permanent use, and I don't allow you to do it, I'm going to say, hey, you can't do that. Pull it away. So if I actually do that, and you don't say anything, yesh loimer, it should be an indication that not always should be meant. I must have gotten his permission, because I would never do something like that. Like imagine I want to hang a bracket on your wall for my hose. Your house is very close to me. You built a fence, and I want to hang a bracket on the fence to support my garden, right? I have no right to do that. So if I do that, you see it, and you don't protest, then I have the nemanis to say, I made an arrangement with you. I paid you for the right to hang my hose on your wall. Because normally, you wouldn't, if you saw me drilling into your wall and putting up brackets, you would say, hey, what are you doing, right? The fact that you didn't is a clear indication that I must have made an arrangement with you. We must have made a fully legal arrangement that I have a right to do this. Is only the only way this is a chazaka is if you say, hey, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? We made an arrangement. I paid you a certain amount of money, and for that money that I paid you, you gave me the right to hang my hose on your fence. And I have a raya that I'm right. What's the raya that I'm right? Because you didn't protest. But what if I didn't say you gave me a right? What am I just saying? Well, since you let me, too bad. In the chazaka, not a chazaka, because the chazaka is merely a raya. It's a raya that we did something, but I have to have some taina that I did do something. The law is if I lived in your property for 3 years, I can't say since I lived there for 3 years it's mine. I could say that I bought it from you properly. The raya that I bought it from you properly is because I lived there for 3 years. So living here for 3 years isn't in and of itself a kinyan. It just means if you lived there for 3 years and nobody protested, now it supports your taina when you claim that you actually bought it. So the same thing with this type of a chazaka. I have my hose hanging on your wall. I can't just say, well, since you let me, too bad, now I have a right to do it. It's not like a squatter's rule in liberal cities where landlords have no rights. To the contrary, I have to have bought it from you. But I could say that I must have bought it from you. If I wouldn't have bought it from you, you would have never stood by watching me do it and not have protest. So therefore, Amar Nachman, if I used herdi there, I can now upgrade to kshure, which is much heavier, which puts a much heavier load on the wall. And kshure are beams. So beams are going to hold up a second floor. Rafters are just going to hold up the ceiling. So it's a much heavier load. But if I have a chazaka to put beams there, asak l'herdi, I can surely put a lighter load. Asak l'herdi is also asak kshure, because once I'm allowed to use your wall for support, we don't make a distinction if it's a heavier support or a lesser support. Ikadami Amar Nachman, asak l'herdi, asak l'kshure, asak l'herdi. Even Reb Nachman said. Amar Reb Nachman, what happens if I have a building that's right up on the property line, and I have an eaves trough, and the pipe drains down into your property. The water, the runoff from my roof is running into your property. So Amar Reb Nachman, aslik l'natfi, aslik l'shafti. Now, sometimes I have an eaves, sometimes I don't even have an eaves. It's just my roof is running off. So if I have a chazaka that my roof is running off into your property, That's mamash a mess. The whole roof was running off. Means if I decide that I want to put up an eaves, and now there'll be a pipe that'll bring the water only down in one corner, for sure I'm allowed to do that because that's less of an encroachment on your property. But if I had a proper eaves that brought the rain down in one place, I don't have a right to remove the eaves and now it's going to drain all over you.
Which one is the bigger mess?
A bigger infringement if it's raining from the whole wall, not just from one little place. That's called shaf. No, that's called natfi. So akli natfi asik l'shafki. Shafki is when you have a drain. Natfi means it's dripping off the roof everywhere. But asik l'shafki lo asik l'natfi. Even if I only have a chazaka that my drain pipe is bringing the water down to one place, I can actually let it drain from everywhere. Now I have to be clear. There's no downpipe. It's as if there was no downpipe, but it's all dripping from one corner. You kind of let the shoe from the downpipe. There's another pshat. Now, there's two pshatim brought down in the Rishon for Shrifa the Irvini. One I understand and one I don't understand.
Why do you say that there's no down? But then the whole roof side.
There's a gutter and it drips from one corner, but it's all coming from one place. Now, Shrifa the Irvini is they used to build hunting huts, so a guy could hide to go hunting. I'm sorry. Yeah, we've had it many times. The way it was constructed, what they would take two big rings, and then they would take a whole bunch of reeds or vines and stand them up vertically around those rings and tie them to it. And then at the top, they would take all the tops of the reeds and bind them together. So it was like a teepee. It was almost like a teepee, but it means it drains on all four sides. Right? So about tree for the urban Eloi, because it drains on all four sides. That's one shot in the Rishonim. I don't understand that. Because if we're talking about a neighbor, what's the difference if it drains on all four sides? I'm only going to be subject to one side of it. Unless I had a tree with urban in your property, unless could be if I had a tree with urban in your property, then that's called a chazaka to have it in your property. The other shot in the Rishonim is tree with urban doesn't mean he mamish had a tree with urban. It means his roof of his house he lined with those same type of vines. And those same type of vines actually cause more runoff than the regular roof. Because a regular roof, the shingles, the wood, they absorb a little bit of water. So you're not getting a full brunt of the rain. Some of it is being absorbed, you're just getting the runoff. But tree wood is it's so watertight, those materials are so good at repelling water that there'll be a lot more runoff. And that was the question here. Even that would be allowed, and over the that he allowed the chazaka. Amar Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Hamaskabai Sakaler. Somebody rents a house to his friend. We have to go quickly because we're running out of time. Hamaskabai Sakaler, in an apartment building. So you have over here someone who owns an apartment building, and he rented somebody an apartment, which is how it works. The halacha is, as a renter, I don't just get my apartment, I also get mishtamish bezize uvakasla daramis. I have a right as a renter to use any windowsill around my apartment, any little thing that sticks out, I can use as a shelf. If there's a hole in the wall, I could use the hole in the wall as a shelf. 4 amas around my property. So around my apartment, I'm entitled to any hole or any shelf that sticks out of the wall. I have, as a renter, a right to use up to 4 amas from the unit that I rent. And stepping with uvei, which means on the roof, on top of the wall, the top surface of the wall, I have a right to use as well. The Rishonim say, of course, that's speaking if I rented the upstairs apartment. The Malkam Shinahagu. Alvo, but Tarbit Apadni's landlords want to beautify their property. So people should want to rent there. If you go into some buildings have a beautiful lounge in the front. You probably notice like a beautiful lounge in the front. And sometimes they're even locked up. You can't even get to them. They just look nice, but you can't go in. Some landlords had outside their property, they actually had a beautiful little garden that was walled in. There you have no rights to anything there at all, because that's just made for aesthetics, and the landlord never gave you any rights to use it. Rav Nachman argued on who he was quoting, and he said, I feel with tarbits, apadni you're allowed to use. But the space behind the building, that for sure loy, that the landlord holds for himself. Rav Amar, I feel is also included in the lease, and the tenant has a right to use. Amarvina, what if someone decides, a tenant decides that he wants to put up an awning over his property? Or how about my neighbor has a wall and I want to use his wall to anchor my awning to? So the halacha is, if I anchor something to his wall, it's like a temporary type of awning. Up to 30 days, it's not a chazaka, because a person would normally not mind if someone used his wall to anchor an awning to, if it was like a temporary awning. But if it's already 30 days past and the owner didn't say, hey, what are you doing over there? Now I already could claim that we worked it out, I paid you, and I have a right to do this. The sukkah, the mitzvah, what about building a sukkah on property that wasn't yours? At shiva yoimin will have a chazaka. For 7 days, it's not a chazaka, but Basra shiva yoimin, after 7 days, it's a chazaka. No, you don't have 30 days. You know why? Because sukkah is 7 days. You take it down after sukkah. Zok Tosh is 7 days is lavdafke. It's really 8 days, because on Shmini Atzeres, no one's taking down the sukkah. But there are those who argue Tosh and hold that on Shmini Atzeres, you might not take down the sukkah, but you could be memayed it a little bit. You could be memayed it a little bit, and that will be an indication that you're taking it down. So it could be even 7 days of chazak. V'chaver betina, but if you installed it in such a way where it was clearly a permanent type of installation, then it's not a chazak after 30 days or after 7 days. La'alta of a chazaka, because nobody would see someone doing a permanent installation on his property and not say anything unless there was actually an arrangement to allow it. Amar Abaye, shnei batim v'shnei tzidei rishus harabah. We live on the opposite sides of the street in separate houses, but the problem is, if I'm on my roof, I can see right into your roof. If you're on your roof, you can see right into my roof. So we still have a problem of hezek re'iyah, so we need a wall. Either I have to build a wall, or you got to build a wall, but someone's got to build a wall. So the halacha is, ze oise maika l'chatzi gagoy, v'ze oise maika l'chatzi gagoy, ze shaloi keneged ze umad. Let's say each of our homes are 30 feet wide, and we're directly opposite each other. So really, we need a 30-foot partition. Now, neither one could force the other guy to build a 30-foot partition. So what I do is, one guy, they could say, you got to build a 15-foot partition, and I'll build a 15-foot partition. And between that, and we'll offset them. If you'll be on the north side, I'll be on the south side. This way, I won't be able to see into your property. But it's not enough to just have 15 feet and 15 feet, because I can look in from an angle. So you'd have to build 20 feet, and I have to build 20 feet. So there's some overlap. So therefore, these are the two houses. On this house, there would be a wall from here to here, and on this house, there'd be a wall from here to here. So between the two walls, neither one would be able to see into each other. Okay, that's the rule. Zok Gemara, my Rishus Harabim. Why is this dafka Rishus Harabim? Afilu Rishus Yachadami. Even if we're both in Rishus Yachad, it should have the same rule. Why is this a Rishus Harabim shayla? Zok Gemara, Rishus Harabim is tzrichalei. The chiddush is that even in Rishus Harabim, I have a right to demand that you build a wall. Why? Why is it my problem? Anyway, you're going to build a fence because you're worried about the people on the street looking in. Kamash Lum, the Amalei, he could say, no, for the Rabbim, I wouldn't have had to build a wall. You know why? During the day, there's a problem. At night, they don't see me. I'm going to use it at night. So I wouldn't have needed a wall. But you're there even at night. Or at ben biyam ben belayla chazli, or inami rabim kika imno chazli kisifno loy chazli. If I'm standing, a guy from the street could look up; he'll see me. But if I'm sitting, he wouldn't be able to see me at all if I'm sitting down. At chazli ben kika imno ben kiyasif. Another difference is rabim kima ainu chazli. You have to look. You have to look up to see if there's someone there. You don't automatically notice. Kiloy ma'ani loy chazli. At if you're sitting up there, I'm in your face. Memela nami chazli. Now, I remember when I was in Lakewood, so one Ben Izman, I didn't go anywhere. I stayed in Yeshiva Ben Izman. It was like a regular Zman. We didn't run around on trips in our days. We stayed home. But I took my wife on a 3-day trip to Washington. And I made up with another couple that you'll go away for 3 days and I'll watch your children. And you'll go away for 3 days and then I'll go away for 3 days and you'll watch my children. They got the better deal. My kids were better behaved. And this is Kamina. So we stayed in a hotel. What?
How do you know?
We stayed in the hotel. That was it was downtown, and it was a very tall building, and there was another hotel directly across the street. The hotel that was directly across the street was an expensive hotel. I think it was Intercontinental. there were times where the president actually was running the United States from that hotel, because it was once when one of the presidents died, his Almuna they didn't throw his Almuna out of the White House right away, but another president took over, so they took over a floor of, I think it was the Intercontinental Hotel, and they actually ran the White House out of the hotel. So I was directly across the street in Schnurr Hotel. I don't know the name of it. I'll call it Schnurr Hotel. And what happened is I went to the window and I opened my window to look. When you're high up and you look, you actually see directly into the room right across the street. And there's another guy. He was standing there like Odom Arishan Koidem Achet, right there in his window. And he doesn't happen. It's a huge hotel. Who's going to notice? Especially someone down on the floor. You don't look. But the guy right up opposite sees him straight there. And then as soon as he noticed that I was there, he went boom. He closed the curtain so fast he didn't know what hit him. But that's mamish what this Gemara is saying. If you're high up and he's high up, you actually see right in. If you're on the floor, you don't see. Don't worry, I only saw him. I didn't see what was in the back. I never saw anything like that in my life. I got blown away. Shaip on fence, Michigan, but then I got. Took a little bit of while to chap what was going on over there. Actually, nicht. But Zok mir weiter. Zok mir weiter. Amar Mar. Ze oise maka. Lachatzi gagoy. V'ze oise maisa. Lachatzi gagoy. Ze shaloi keneged ze uman. Fek me pshita. That's very much. Why do I need the Gemara to tell me that? It's a very simple shot. It's a very simple arrangement. That's not what it is. The kodem chad minayu bi'avad. I made a wall for half, and it's built already, it's done. So maybe the guy who didn't build can say, let the other guy say, why should I now build a wall in half? Whatever the wall is going to cost me, I'll pay you. And you make the wall cover your whole property.
Why doesn't he want a wall? It's practical.
Kamash Malon, that's a very good. Why wouldn't I want a wall? The Amrlay, at my time of the office. Why don't you want it? Why wouldn't you want it? Because it puts extra weight on your wall lower down. I don't want to do it. The question is, what's the happening that I could make him do it? The teretz is because it saves money. It's much more expensive to build a half a wall here and a half a wall there than it would be to build the whole wall in one place. A and B is then there's also the overlap. So there's two significant savings. There's a labor savings, and I'm building less linear feet. I can say, too bad. I don't want to put that extra weight on my wall. How could my gag be near your chutzner? The teretz is we're on the hill. We're on the hillside. So my chutzner is actually higher than the level of your roof. It's possible to have that. The halacha is you have to build a maika dalar amis. Avo ben gag legag loy. If it's two roofs side by side, there you wouldn't need. I guess he's arguing on what we said further. Rab Nachman Didei Amar Eine Zakuk L'Dalar Amis. You don't need a wall of Dalar Amis. Now, Dalar Amis wall is code name for Hezek Re'iyah wall. You don't need a Hezek Re'iyah wall. Al Zakuk L'Mechitzas Hasara, that's code word for the Asisa Maika Legagecha Gag to prevent something from falling. Lamai Ila Hezek Re'iyah on the roof, on the guy.
I have two roofs, so
there's no two roofs. There's a Gag Keneged Chotzer.
That's the first, and then
that's the case we're talking about.
So what's the story of the two guys?
You don't need to have any fence for Hezekriya.
No, I will just. But you do need
because you have the problem of Asisa Michael Gagach.
So what's the story of Gag Legag?
No, it doesn't mean they're touching. It means they're close enough to each other. Lama Ila Hezekriya Arba 10 tachim is not enough. Ila Nitvis Olav Kaganav. Oh, you're right. This is where it's actually mamish connected because the old city of Yerushalayim, all the houses are connected. Ila Nitvis Olav Kaganav. If it's because to prevent you from migrating into my roof, the Mesibas Ba'al Masagi, I don't even need a barrier that's 10 tefachim. It's just enough to have some vertical post. And the Ila Gedim Atloyim, if it's so that animals shouldn't pass through, which is even less than Mesibas Ba'al. Really, just so that he can't come into my property. But the Mesibas, so why is the Mesibas enough? Because the Mesibas Matzi Mishtametle Omar Mitzur Kamatrina. If I catch him on my roof, he could say, my tennis ball fell. I went to get it. I didn't notice that I was infringing on your property. The Mechitza, sir, if there's a proper barrier there, loy mati mishtamitli. And that's why I have a right to demand that, because I want to make sure you're not going to infringe on my property. Major effect Gemara. One of my chotzer is higher than your gag. You don't force him to make any type of tikkun. My love, you don't need anything at all. So you see that there's no chiyuv to do anything at all, not even a mechitza sarah. You can't force him to make a hezek re'il wall, because there's still an issue of nitbis alav kedan. Itmar we have two chatzeres, one is above the other. So I could look down from my property down into your property. So the question is, we need a wall in between. But the question is, why does the guy who lives on the upper side have to pay for the wall on the lower side? I'll pay for the wall where it's gonna impact my line of sight. I don't have to worry about your line of sight. The guy on the bottom has to start building the wall till it reaches the level of the upper level. The oila, the elyon boinim connected the oila, and Rashi says, and from that point on, I believe they're sharing it. So look, Rashi says, boinim connected the oila, hatachted boilim shaloi milamata acha megia legoy v'karkeisa shochavei. Right? He builds the lower half of the wall on his own because that's only for him. Once he gets to the place where the upper neighbor also requires a wall, now they're both responsible for that wall. So from the point where it reaches the elevation of the upper chutzner, from that point on, they have to go 50-50. The elyon does not chip in to the wall from the lower part, because that's not my problem. I have the upper part. That's your problem. So that's the halacha. No, he has to even chip in to my wall. He has to be a part in the full wall. We have a right to They have to pay for the whole wall. The elyon cannot say rather, he has to help a partner in the whole wall. Then if I'm way higher, where there's no problem whatsoever, there's ein zakagloi. But if it's just a little higher and I still can see a little bit, then it's zakagloi. Okay, now we'll just learn the shaila, but we'll stop with the shaila. Hana by trey davidayre chad havidayre iloi v'chad havidayre tesoi. There were two brothers. One got the upper level and one got the lower level. And you know what happened? The house sunk. Idbar tatoi. The house sunk, and now instead of having 8-foot ceilings, I now have 4-foot ceilings. So the brother who lived on the main level went to the brother to the upper level, let's knock this house down and build it up because I can't work on the house. The upper level guy was clearly someone who didn't care about anybody else. He said, what are you talking about? I'm not Shabbat Kadirna. I'm having a very good time. I have no problem. I'm not interested in accommodating you whatsoever. Okay, we'll stop here because there's a lot more detail to the Shiloh. But that's in the Shiloh we're going to be discussing tomorrow. If you have an upper guy and a lower guy, and the lower guy is sinking, is he able to force the upper guy to rebuild that house because he's losing his use of the space because his ceilings are getting too low? Okay, Baruch Hashem, we finished that. Vav, and tomorrow we'll do the time. Today's 3 massive yard sites, 3 of the Asara Haruge Malchus. Today is their yard site, which is Chaf Hey, which is Chaf Hey Sivan. I believe it's Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, and it is the Shmuel Kohen Gadol. Let me see who it is. It was Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was a Nasi. It was his yard site as well, and there's a 3rd yard site today as well. Let me see if I could pull it up. There are 3 important yard sites. Let's have a look. See here. It's buffet, right? Tomorrow's Rabbi Yosy Zeal. Tomorrow's Rabbi Yosy Zeal, and that's why all the Jewish websites have advertised.
What's going on?
It's the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Tyler Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Kohen Gadol Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, and Rabbi Chanina Skana Kehanim, these three people, they're your children today.
Wasn't after that he came out.
It says over here.
Okay, I have a good story. And I heard it from somebody